Hey, what's up, family? I'm Mike G, and welcome back to The Other Side. Um, I'm really happy tonight to be able to bring you the story of a man who has struggled and fought for most of his life, and he's gracious enough to join us tonight to share his story of never giving up and fighting for the things that make us eternal. Drew McFedries, the Massacre. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Man, I'm doing amazing. It's an honor to see you and be able to talk to you and be able to share your story with anyone who's looking to get some help. Thank you again, man.
No problem.
Um, First of all, is the humidity still 95 there?
Yeah, today it was really hot, but I did a long bike ride this morning, so I worked it out. I got a lot of sweat out today. It's pretty good.
Right on. Well, tell us about growing up in Iowa. What was it like being the mini massacre?
There's, there was no mini map. Um, Growing up in Iowa, I think everybody has their own experience, but for me, I think it would probably surprise people that we do live in a small town kind of area. It's a small city, right? But we do have big city problems, probably more than people would expect, especially when it comes to drugs and things like that, where
Right.
people have access because there's a lot of farmers, right? So they have access
Hmm.
to chemicals, they have access to dynamite and all kinds of crazy stuff. Because,
Transportation.
yeah, I mean, and you guys get around pretty quick, and um, especially the people from the city who want somewhere to hide out, they kind of come to these small towns in Iowa to try to hide out from the law and things like that.
Right on. Um, Tell me about your family. Tell me about your house growing up. What was it like there?
Yeah, that's probably a more rough story to tell. I would say here or there were good times, but most of it was bad. It's a lot of prostitution, a lot of drug involvement, a lot of deceit, lies. You name it, it was pretty heavy and bad. Or you could say abusive, toxic. When it comes to my family, I think that it's a really hard thing to explain, especially through the years of growing up, um, and being mixed, and how that played into how my mother was treated. Because obviously my mother's white, but when she was by herself, she got treated a certain way. When she was with her kids, she got treated another way, and especially with my family and things like that. So um, it was difficult. It was very difficult for her and us. And then obviously my dad wasn't around, so that's kind
When
of around.
was he ever there?
I'd say no, just in general, no. Do I know who he
Do you
is? Yeah. Do I talk to him? Yeah, but he was never really a factor in my life.
do you think it would have made any difference if he was?
That's a great question, because, and I always wondered this myself growing up, and I had to come to terms with this as well. Um, I've seen people who have mom and dad at home, and dad is not a good man. He's not a good person, and the son grows up to be just like the dad. You know, um,
Generational curse.
it sometimes it can be. So the way I look at my situation is, yes, I do know my dad. I talk to my dad more now than I ever have, but he was never really a factor or played any role in my life. And as I grew up, I struggled with that. But what I finally came to terms with was I was almost fortunate not to have a father, because I met so many other great men. Um, and even beginning in my early years, like 12, 13 range, I started finding my way to the gym, to play basketball or lift weights, or all my friends were outside of my house or on the
Hmm.
playground or in the gym. And, sometimes guys would approach me and say, "Hey, man, I see you in the gym by yourself. Like, are you ever where's your mom and dad?" And I would be like, "Oh, my mom's at home. My dad's not around." they'd be like, really? Like, yeah. And then, you know, through conversation and meeting people, I met a lot of great people in the gym. Um, Getting older, I met a lot of great coaches who opened a lot of doors for me. Now I can't say that um, anybody did the work for me. What I
Right.
can say is a lot of them opened doors, meaning I met guys in the gym that would work out with me and they might give me a pointer or two, but I lifted the heavy weights. Um, my coaches, they helped me they enabled me to become an
Hmm.
athlete. And again, I put in the hard work. Um, there were some grueling days in the summer sun that, I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
when I talk about like my high school training, I met first off, I met a guy named Merv. He was the head football coach. He was a great influence for me. Through him, I met other coaches. And then there was finally a guy who trained us over the summer. His name was Kevin. And those workouts were absolutely grueling. In maybe the last week or so, I always talk about that. The last week of training before we went into two-a-days for football was so hot, and we worked so hard. I literally cried the last, six workouts, probably the last six workouts we had. Like every workout after we were done running, I would go to the parking lot and just cry. Like it was that bad. But then again, moving forward through high school, I met some other great coaches. I had another coach named Kevin. I'll just say Kevin T. He was my head coach when I went to Iowa Central. Um, the things I really value about him was he was a small town boy who went to college and found out he wasn't a good athlete. And this is very true. What I realized about him later was he had been losing most of his life. And now he's a head coach at this junior college, but he still had that spirit to win, right? And I watched him struggle and I watched him be confused and I watched him be frustrated. And we all became winners together. And
That's
that was
awesome.
that was a big spark. It was a big spark in my life. The latter part of college, I went to St. Ambrose University here in Davenport, Iowa. I met some good people there, but it wasn't my best experience as far as meeting men that kind of guided me. I did
Right.
have a counselor, one counselor in particular. When I first met him, I knew he was gold. And his name was John. He was a teacher and a counselor. And I still talk to him today. And he's helped me
That's
tremendously.
awesome.
So what I'm saying is when I'm through my youth, I should say up to like 20 years old or so, I was able to meet a lot of great men who somewhat guided me or gave me advice and helped me along the way. The only thing I can say about all these things was it was for me to decide what I wanted to do with it.
Hmm.
And I made the best decisions I could make given my situation.
How how did college transition into a fighting career?
Mm, it's kind of an interesting thing. I actually failed in college. For anybody who really wants to know, I still seek a college degree. Um, I think I have like three courses and I can graduate. I can still
Oh
graduate
wow.
to this day. So I do seek my education. I do seek a college degree. But I had to drop out basically after my fifth year. And over the years, I've taken courses to try to complete it. I just have never completed my college degree.
Right.
So um, I would say that I had a lot of struggles in college due to what was going on back home. Without me in the house, bad things were happening to my mother, bad things were happening to my sisters, bad things were happening with my brother. And what a lot of people didn't know, in which, I couldn't put a lot of words to it at the time myself. Um, what people didn't know was my mother was probably as bad as she could ever have gotten as far as drug addiction. She was using all the hardcore drugs. Um,
Mm.
it is difficult to go home and there's bent spoons all around the house and you're not understanding what's going on. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so she was probably as deep into drug addiction as she could go, and um, I couldn't handle it. My brother had been taken away. I wasn't sure if I was ever going to see my little brother again. That was very difficult because I waited 15 years for a little brother, and I really struggled with losing my brother and thinking I would never see him again. Um, so I dropped out and I just decided to work. And I kind of came back to the house where we were living at the time, which happened to be my grandparents' house. That was my grandfather, my mother's father and mother. They
Mm-hmm.
lived there in the past. So I came back to that house, got it cleaned up, got it organized, and I lived there and I started working at a bar. And that bar was called Stars and Stripes. And the we went through the winter and the summer rolled around. And all the bouncers and the bartenders, everybody started talking about the Tuesday night fights are coming. The Tuesday night fights are coming. And I was like, I had no idea what they were talking about. And they were like, man, you should really try it. You should really try it. And they were like, man, you'd be perfect for it, because being a bouncer and everything, people seeing me being able to defend myself or protect people, they were like, man, you should really try this. And so my first experience was boxing. We did these like small boxing matches.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the early beginnings of fighting. But back then, it wasn't really, for me, it wasn't really fighting. It was just having fun, It's just,
Now, are
um,
you talking about like tough man style, just block the overhand right and throw a punch back that lands and you win?
some of them. So
Okay.
this is a very interesting point about this specific club and bar. Um,
Okay.
again, this place was called Stars and Stripes, and Pat Miletich at the time was the champion. He was the champion in the UFC. So he had all these highly skilled fighters that were training with him in town. So they were training
Mm-hmm.
in, I believe it was, I believe it was Ultimate Fitness in Bettendorf, Iowa. And those guys would come to the Tuesday night fights and fight. So they were fairly serious. But a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the guys, that participated didn't know how to fight. So it was somewhat like tough man. But then
Right.
you had these mixed in fights that were like really serious, like local real boxers were fighting local.
Gotcha.
And at the time we were called, they called us pit fighters. They called us uh,
Mm-hmm.
NHB, no holds barred
Yeah.
fighters. So at the time, it was kind of no man's land. There was no real regulations. I was lucky to
Now, is this
miss.
where you could eye gouge, fish hook?
Well, in the early days when I just got in,
Mm-hmm.
before I started competing in MMA as we know it today, um, the only thing I knew was you couldn't bite, you couldn't eye gouge, and all you had to do was wear a mouthpiece, and they really didn't care if you wore gloves or not. So I caught the very tail end of the the regulated part, right? Like
Okay.
before there were regulations and rules. So um, yeah, it was really raw. So I mean, even some of my early matches, I always talk about. I never fought in a cage until I don't think I fought in a cage until my second or third pro fight. So in the early days, everybody fought in rings.
Right.
So you kind of had to battle the ropes too, especially if it was what we call NHB style fight. Um, sometimes you'd hit a guy and he'd kind of like turn and stick his head outside the ropes, and you'd kind of have to fight him out around the ropes and stuff. So yeah, it was a very interesting start to what is known today as MMA. But back then, um, there was, like I said, people call us pit fighters. People called
Right.
it no holds barred. Everywhere around the U.S., people were like, "Oh, it's human cockfighting. This should be illegal." And I was very fortunate to be on the front end of the regulations when the regulations started. When you actually had
Gotcha.
to wear a cup. Because guys didn't have to wear a cup. They could wear
Yeah.
jeans. They could wear a gi. They could wear a t-shirt and underwear. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
As long as you went out, whatever you felt comfortable fighting in, as long as you wore a mouthpiece and you went out there, that was what you had.
Wow. Now,
So
how did you
that was
hook up with Pat?
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just how did you end up training at probably, for people that don't know about the Militich fighting system, it was, I think most people would consider the first gym to probably incorporate everything under one roof. It wasn't a karate gym, a judo gym, a
Right,
wrestling gym. It was everything. There were specialists in every form of martial arts there.
right. So that's one thing I always talk about with Pat Miletich. I believe that Pat Miletich does not get enough credit for what he did. And he
I
really
agree.
he's the innovator of our sport. He's the
Yep.
innovator of what is known as MMA today in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So, whatever seal, stamp, or approval that someone needs, it should really go through him, in my opinion, because
Mm-hmm.
he was the first person to realize. Because here's another thing: there's no internet, right? So
Right.
when I went to a show and the ref said, "Hey, are you ready? Are you ready? Fight!" You never knew what the guy how he fought. You never knew his
Right.
style until you started fighting. So you might start fighting a guy and he can really box. So you might have to use your legs. And you might figure out he's a great Thai guy and then wrestle him, take him down and realize he doesn't know shit on the ground or stuff. Sorry. Um,
No,
so
you're okay.
yeah. So that was one of the more exciting parts, I think, of the beginning of fighting and whatever else was that idea that you have no idea what you're up against
Right.
and having to go through that. But Pat was the innovator, so it was great to train with him and have him on your side because
Sure.
most matches you went to, you could kind of morph your style to whoever you were fighting. So again, if it was a great Muay Thai guy, you could wrestle him. If it was a great ground guy, you could stand up and box him, and so on. You could trade off, or some of the guys like to mention us, our my early stages or early start. They would say we're lay and pray guys, um, meaning we'll fight you bad, fight you real hard,
Mm-hmm.
fight you however really really tough. Then we take you down and we lay on you, and then we get back up and we fight. We get our air back and we fight again. So early on, we were called lay and pray guys, and I think that changed with time, especially training with guys like Jens Pulver. Jeremy Horn was a big influence for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
He doesn't get
but
nearly enough credit either, just like Pat.
yeah, and Jeremy trained all the best fighters. He
Mm-hmm.
trained with or trained or fought all the best fighters.
Yeah.
Um, he's definitely a guy who didn't get enough credit, in my opinion. Um, but I'll reverse actually to what you were asking me before was like, how did I get to Pat's? How did I get to
Mm-hmm.
Pat Militich's?
Yeah.
So again, we're going back to the Stars and Stripes thing. So I'm boxing in this, uh, like you said, it's kind of a tough man style uh, fight thing that we're doing in a ring, pretty good sized ring in the middle of a dance floor in this bar.
Mm-hmm.
And my manager, who later became Monty Cox, later became my manager. Monty is the one who put on the show, and so Monty thought that I was sent there to beat up Militich guys, and I had no clue. I didn't even know who these people were.
He
And
thought you were a shark.
yeah, he thought so they asked me. Monty came to me a couple times and he was like, who's training you? Where did you come from? Who are you with? And who, all asking me all these questions. And I was like, I'm from the Davenport. I'm from here. I went to Bettendorf High School. I've always been here. I don't know what you're talking about. And he thought I was lying. And so this is how I'll tell you the exact story how I got to Pat's. One night we're doing the fights like normal, and just so you know, I worked at this bar, so I was part of the crew that put the cage together, or not the cage, put the ring together and took the ring down.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a common thing for fighters back then was, you follow the trailer to the gym, you take the ring out of the trailer, you set it up, put the lights up, you fight, and then you tear it down, you put it back on the trailer,
Oh,
and you all go home. That was normal. That was normal back then.
wow.
It really was. It was normal.
That's wild.
It was very normal for us to put the ring up, have our show, have our fights, and then tear the ring down, put it back on the trailer, and everybody went home. So
Wow.
early that night, we put the ring together. Monty shows up, everybody's signing up, and I did know Pat Miletich because he went to Bettendorf High School. So I knew of him and I knew he was the champ. I just really didn't know much about the sport. Okay. So he walks in, he's got a couple rough looking dudes with him. I mean, back then when you looked around the room, you knew who the fighters were.
Mm-hmm.
They all kind of walked with a hunch or a limp, or, they had a weird thing about their eye or something, or they had stitches on their face, or, they all had like, kind of like scuffed up knuckles or something. You just always knew who the fighters were.
Mm-hmm.
So that night, that was the first time I ever met Lee Murray. And I signed up to fight. Me and Lee Murray are pretty much the same size. At the time, I was fairly big. I'd say I was about 220, somewhere in that range. Lee Murray was probably closer to 205 or something.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you know who Lee Murray is, right?
Oh yeah, big heist.
Okay. Just
Yes,
making
yes,
sure.
sir. Yes, sir.
Some people might not know who he is. So Pat's there with Lee Murray. Now Lee Murray had flown in to train with Pat specifically to hone his skills, basically. So they brought him to the show so he could get a matchup. And so I'm fighting Lee Murray. And I remember they announced us, we do our pre-fight thing. We're warming up in the back. And back then, you usually warmed up in the same room as your opponent.
That's weird.
So, like, he's like
That's
5
weird.
feet from me. Yeah, he's like 5 feet from me, and I got guys telling me, okay, when he gets you like this, do that. And, it's like the
Right.
guy is he's standing right next to you. But
Yeah.
that was common for us, like in the early days, to um, you kind of warmed up in a broom closet somewhere. It was usually a really small space. Usually you didn't have wrestling
Right.
mats and all that stuff. So we warm up. They announce us. Now I look across I look across the ring there. There's Lee Murray and Pat's in his corner. And in the back of my mind, I was nervous. I was scared. But I'm like, I'm going to fight this guy. So ref says, "Are you ready?" And I can't remember who really refed it. I think there was a guy named Bart. This guy named Bart, I think, was refing it. He's either Bart or Andy, one of the two. Bart, there was a guy named Andy who used to ref a lot. So it's Bart or
Okay.
Andy. So I look over there, there's Lee Murray, Pat Miletich standing next to him. And I just had some guy like holding my water bottle, you know? And so fight starts. I go out, I take Lee down, got him on the ground. I'm hitting him a little bit. He turned me over. He hit me a little bit. We scrambled back to our feet. Now, in my mind, I thought we were fighting with amateur rules. So all of a sudden, I'm getting closed fist punch, and back then it was open hands. So you used
Right.
an amateurs used open hands.
Mm-hmm.
I thought we were fighting with amateur rules. So I'm hitting the guy with open hands, and then I start getting full-fledged knuckles. I'm getting punched. So I kind of was like, hey, whatever works for you, buddy. So we start really throwing. And
Mm-hmm.
back then, I really didn't have any like true boxing skills. But as a kid, I had been in a lot of street fights and had to defend myself many times.
You have an
So
explosive power that a lot of people don't.
maybe, but I could also argue different angles of that, like speed. You know what nullifies speed? Power. What
Yeah.
nullifies power? Speed. You know, you could.
Yeah.
There's different ways to approach it. So me and Lee were fighting, and I get tied up with him. We're still in the first round, and I got him around the waist. I'm trying to drag him down. He starts elbowing me in the back, and I'm like, dude, all this stuff he's doing is illegal, you know. And but I mean, we're really fighting. We're really fighting.
Mm-hmm.
So we're getting towards the end of that round, and I remember the last thing that happened at the end of that round was he went to throw a big head kick, and I leaned back, and he missed me, and he falls, and I jumped on top of him, and that was the end of the round. And I was like, oh. So we go to round number two, and back then it was we didn't have okay, like we all know in MMA today, everybody pretty much knows that it's 3 5-minute rounds, right?
Right. Right.
A championship match is 5 5-minute rounds. Everybody
Right.
knows that. Back when I started, you fought until somebody lost. It wasn't
Right.
there was no there was no draws, there was no nothing. You just fought until somebody lost.
Yep.
So we go into the second. I, I'm gassed. Now, mind you, my only experience with cardio was being a football player, like running sprints or
Mm-hmm.
something. So we go into the second round. Me and Lee are fighting. I take Lee down, and I had Lee pinned. Basically, I had pinned him up against the ropes. I took him down, and I had him kind of like under the bottom rope. So his head was on the outside of the ropes, but that was still the edge of the ring. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of rings have like 2 or 3 feet outside of the ropes. So I had him under that rope. So I'm through the rope
Mm-hmm.
and he's underneath the rope, and I'm hitting him. And I remember hitting him, and he was going out and he was popping up. He's going out and he's popping up. And I was like, oh my God. And I was so tired. And I remember he kind of got his guard back. And I didn't know anything about jiu-jitsu then. He gets his guard back, and he swings to this arm bar, and he arm bars me. And I really tapped because I was just too tired to fight it. Like, that was the realness of it. Like, I was just too tired to keep going. So I
Yeah.
tapped to the arm bar. After the fight, we all go in the back room. They had a big back room area. And me and Lee are sitting there side by side, and we're getting untaped and everything. And Lee's like, oh my God, this guy was so much tougher than I thought, you know. And he's an English guy, so he's got an accent.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, God, the guy was really tough. He's really tough. He's a lot tougher than I thought he'd be. And Pat's standing there. He's like, yeah, man. He's like, Pat is now like, where are you from? And I'm like, from Davenport. So I would go through the same process with Pat as I did Monty. And
Mm-hmm.
Pat, at that point, Pat was like, listen, dude, I cannot have you out here. Like, he's like, you have to come to my gym. Like, you have to come to the gym. He goes, I can't have you out here in the world. I can't have you down the street. And I can't have you fighting my guys, because I was giving him trouble. So that was my beginning. That was when Pat gave me my first invite to so-called Militich camp at the time.
Right.
And that was my introduction to Pat's gym, was my fight with Lee Murray.
That's awesome. Everyone should know you went to school with a fairly notable UFC legend, Ruthless Robbie Lawler,
Right.
another member of the Militich team. The first time you walked in that gym and you saw the fighters you named, Jens Pulver, Matt Hughes, Robbie Lawler, Tim Sylvia, how did you? Did any part of you kind of go like this, or was it instantly motivating to be around those types of people.
What do you mean like this? What do you mean?
Um, would you say that you were intimidated walking into a room with people like that, or did it bring out the best in you immediately? I guess.
Um, I wasn't intimidated. I was definitely there to learn, which I learned. you either you either learn or you get your ass kicked. There's one of the two.
Yeah, or both.
Um, right. Um, I'll tell you a little background. I had met Matt Hughes previous to me being at Pat's,
Okay.
and our interactions weren't very good because I believe there's always been some kind of, especially in Iowa. Okay, there's a some sort of beef between football players and wrestlers, and I think that me and Matt kind of had that where,
Mm-hmm.
and I love Matt, I really do, but it was always like, I'd start talking trash to Matt, or he'd start talking trash to me, and his favorite line was always, when it, if you're feeling froggy, just jump whenever you're ready, and like, and
I can
we
see
would
him saying
me,
that.
yeah, and so me and Matt, we would go back and forth like that all the time. So then I get into the gym and I see Matt, and he's like, yeah, his eyes lit up. He was like, yeah, finally, we're gonna get this out of the way, and I won't lie, like when I started out, Matt would twist me up into a pretzel, but he was never really like the stand up fighter that I thought he'd
Right.
be, so he didn't want to box with me and I didn't want to wrestle with him. So we're pretty much even, you could call it.
Um, I wanted to share something with everyone. Robbie Lawler is quoted as saying that you were the hardest hitter he was ever around.
Right.
That's saying something. What do you attribute that to?
I mean, I think it's a great compliment, of course, but I'll say that what I do and what I've always done is not really, it's not really a matter of how hard I hit. It's kind of a sleight of hand thing. It's kind of like a card trick, right? So you just make somebody believe something that's not really true, if you want to put it that way.
Okay.
But me and Robbie, we trained together for 13, maybe 13 to 15 years. So, yeah, so we were very similar because we both fight left handed,
Mm-hmm.
where he's a true left hander. He's left handed. Um, I'm what they call a converted southpaw.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm right handed, but I fight left handed.
Okay.
Um, and me and Robbie had a lot of go rounds. I mean, there were times where, if he was fighting a bigger opponent, we would do a lot of sparring. And if there's anything anybody would ever talk about when it came to being at Pat's, in training, they would always talk about the sparring sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And there were times where Pat would just walk in the room. He'd say, "Hey, when I start the clock, because you get knocked out, you're done. If you bleed, clean it up. I'll be back in an hour." And he'd hit the button. And and I mean that was it. Like, I mean, we were
Wow.
we had some grueling. I mean, I'm talking. We had some real battles when it came to sparring, and how many different styles you would see in a night, or how many different body sizes and types you would see in a
Right.
night. Um, we had some really rough nights, especially when it's hot here. Uh, when we got to Champions Gym, that room would be about 115 degrees. Pat would just turn the air off, and he'd open the back door, but the roof was there was like a tar roof, black tar roof.
Mm-hmm. Oh man.
I'm telling you, it was so hot in there, and I mean seriously, it was like fighting in a sauna. And so some of
Suffer.
those, yeah, there were. I mean, I remember guys coming in from out of town, and they would
Mm-hmm.
last maybe 2 rounds, like maybe a round or two, and they'd be like, "We can't do this," or there were some guys that tried to stick it out, like they would maybe go like 4 or 5 rounds, and then they'd go to the hospital, get IVs, for IV hydration. There are a lot of guys that just left and never came back. that
Wow.
was that that was very common. Like I remember guys showing up like on a Monday. We always talked about this too. There'd be a guy, like a brand new guy would show up on Monday, no matter where he was from. Guy would show up on Monday. He'd do Monday. He would do Tuesday. By the time Wednesday came around, he was usually thinking, how fast can I get out of this thing? And I would say if a guy lasted 3 days, he could usually go the rest of the week or continue training.
Hmm.
But typically those guys were gone in about 3 days. 3 days of training, they wouldn't come back ever.
Wow. Tell me, tell me what it was like getting word that you were going to the UFC.
That's a very interesting question. So a lot of people know I was sick for a long time. I was sick for close to 3 years, and uh, I kind of came out of it through miraculously somehow. I got the right medical attention I needed, and I got healed up, and I started training again. I never thought I would train again. I never thought I'd fight again. And how that started, I had a good friend named Aaron. Um, and this is kind of a tough story to tell, but um, I was real sick, and Aaron had called me and he said he wanted to get involved in some way with fighting. And he said, will you come to the gym and hold pads for me? And I said, sure. So I'd go to the gym, I'd hold pads for Aaron. Now, Aaron did have the ability. I mean, he was really tall. He's probably 6'2", 6'3", well-built guy, very long arms. He's not too skinny, not too big. He was actually like more of a kind of a Boss Rutan size guy.
Right.
And so I was holding pads for him, and my friend took his own life, and it was a very difficult time. Still to this day, it's very hurts. And I thought that if I did anything, Aaron would want to see me training. He'd want to see me stay in the gym. He wouldn't want me to stop doing what we were doing. And so I stayed. And month after month, I got better and I could train longer, and I was holding pads and being the throw dummy. And um, then I started running again, and I started lifting weights again. And I came back and I had a fight. I won that fight. And it was about a week later. Now it's funny, my real name's Andrew. And so I was hanging out with another friend of mine named Andrew. So we're the same name. So we're hanging out, and my phone rings. I pick it up. That's my manager, Monty. And he's like, hey, man, I got a question for you. And I was like, yeah. He's like, are you in good shape? He goes, you just had that fight last week. He goes, you didn't gain a lot of weight, did you? And I said, no, I'm probably about 205 pounds, maybe. He goes, okay, good, good. He goes, well, do you want another fight? So I don't see why not. I'm in good shape. I feel pretty good. I think I can do
Hmm.
this. And he's like, okay, well, I got to fight for you. And I was like, okay, against who? Just, in general, I was like, yeah, okay, who is it? And he's like, well, the guy's Italian. He's from Italy. And I was like, my first thoughts were like, what is a guy going to do? He's coming from Italy to Iowa to fight me. Like something didn't add up. I
That's
didn't get
fishy.
it. And so I was like, okay, so the guy's Italian. I go, he's in Italy right now. He goes, well, he's probably coming to the US pretty soon. And I was like, I still didn't understand. I was like, okay, where's the show? He goes, well, it's in Vegas. And I was like, Vegas? He goes, wait a minute, no. He goes, I think it's in California, Sacramento, California. And I was like, Sacramento? I was like, so a guy's coming from Italy and he wants to meet me in Sacramento for a fight? I still wasn't getting it. And Monty goes, well, it's for the UFC. And I was like, I
Oh.
was, I was like, I was like, no way, you know. And I go, well, I go, dude. I was like, when? You know, he goes, you got 17 days. And a
Oh.
lot of people, yeah, a lot of people don't know this. A lot of times when guys get their opportunity to go in,
Mm-hmm.
most of those guys, it's on short term. It's on a short notice.
Yeah.
So I got short notice, 17 days on a 205-pound fight. And I was already 205. I just fought at 85.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually went to that weigh-in. I think I was 203. Alicio, he was actually a little, I thought he was a little bigger than me. Like he seemed a little more buck, you know what I mean? Like bigger and
Mm-hmm.
stronger. Um, and we had the fight. That was my introduction, and I was really shocked by the way Monty went at it. Like I think he likes to surprise guys, you know. So that was my introduction.
Right on. How many fights did you have in the UFC altogether?
I think it was nine,
9. That's what
nine
I
maybe.
was thinking.
Yeah, to be honest, I never really kept track, and I never really watched my record, or I didn't watch other guys' records. I didn't. I kind of kept my nose out of it. I just lived my life, you know.
No, I asked that because I don't know if you remember a few months back when you and I first started speaking. Um, it was because I wanted to share with you a statistic that I had read online, and that was at the time, and it is still the case now, even though I think it may have adjusted a second or two either way. You have the second fastest finishing average time per fight of any fighter in UFC history. You go in, you end it, and that's it. That's number 2 all time, man. That's wild.
Yeah, I think actually for a while I think I had two records. I think I had two records for quite some time, but uh, yeah, I mean, to be honest, man, I just wanted my check. Like, that's,
There for the bag.
I mean, that was. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'll say that I never was saturated in MMA. I never knew I'd be an MMA guy.
Right.
I always thought I'd be in the NFL. That's what I thought. I thought I'd go in the NFL. Um, I wanted to be a football player, and that didn't happen. And I found myself in this fighting world. And yeah, I mean, again, I never really kept track of statistics. I never kept track of who was better, who was worse. I really didn't care. I mean, it was the money that let me live the kind of lifestyle I wanted to live. I really
Gotcha.
enjoyed the gym. I enjoyed my teammates. I enjoyed my coaches. I enjoyed working out. I enjoyed the travel. We traveled everywhere. Um, you meet a lot of crazy people, a lot of fun people. You meet all kinds of different, you know, different cultures, and
Sure.
um, so those are the things I really enjoyed. As far as the actual fighting itself, it was just a means to everything else. It wasn't like, oh, I can't wait for my next fight so I can prove that I'm the baddest dude on the planet. It was, you know, things like that.
Gotcha. Um, if you don't mind me sharing, you received a medical diagnosis in 2002. Could you tell us about that and how it affected your career?
Yeah. So just again, like I'm a very straightforward person. So I'd had a couple little bouts, like a couple little issues with my stomach, and I didn't really understand it. And what I'm saying is, one night I got up in the middle of the night, I go to the bathroom, and nothing but blood comes out of me. Um,
Mm,
and I got really worried. I went to the ER, um, and they told me I was fine. Time went by, a couple months or so, and same thing. I will admit that one time was I'd gone out for the night. I'd been out drinking and stuff like that. I got home, passed out, and I woke up early in the morning, went to the bathroom, nothing but blood came out of me. So I was thinking maybe it had something to do with drinking, but it didn't. And I remember I was getting ready for back then what was the Super Brawl. Remember the Super Brawl at all?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Super Brawl, I think it was in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was trying to get ready for that, and I wasn't sure if I was going to fight at 205 or 185. I was just going to take whatever show they gave me and
Mm-hmm.
fight at whatever weight they wanted me at. And so I was hovering around 205. I was probably like 206 or 207, and I was in amazing shape. I was in great shape. And one day I woke up and I just had this tremendous fever. I felt like nauseous all the time, like almost like you can't keep anything down. You
Mm-hmm.
want to throw it up. Uh, so I ended up back in the ER probably for the third or fourth time. And this time it didn't go away. So every time I went to the bathroom, blood came out of me. I couldn't eat anything. I couldn't drink anything. Um, every time I went to the ER, because I was in such great shape, they would tell
Mm-hmm.
me I was okay and they would send me home. And I'm like, hey, I'm not okay. Like blood is coming out of me. And they were like, but look, all your vitals and everything is perfect. And they were like, look at you, you're ripped and you're in shape. And I was like, no, I'm like, I'm dying. So the initial diagnosis was, I believe they were just kind of saying like an IBS thing.
Okay.
And then my second diagnosis was ulcerative colitis. And then my third diagnosis was Crohn's disease. So at that point, from that point on, for the next 3 years, I really battled that Crohn's disease. It was a very, very hard time. Very hard time.
How tell us how you overcame that.
Lots of trials and tribulation. Um, so part of it was the medical system, right? So I didn't have
Mm-hmm.
enough money to buy the medications that were needed. I mean, the medications that were needed were thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
I in the beginning, I wasn't seeing the right doctors. I had to. The first doctor I had, he told me just go ahead and get the bag. Was what do they call that?
Colostomy bag.
Colostomy bag. He said, listen. He goes, I've seen people with this problem. You're going to deal with this for the rest of your life. You might as well just go on and get the bowel removed and have your colostomy bag. And I was like, F you, you know? I was like, I just
Nope.
was like, nope, I go, that's not going to work. I go, honestly, I told him, I was like, I'd rather die. I'd just rather die.
Yeah.
So I fought against the doctors and wanting to do surgery on me. And basically what would happen is I'd go to the doctor and I'd be like, there's got to be another way. And they'd be like, no, you have to get the surgery. You got to get the colostomy bag. And then everything after that will be fine. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't believe it. So time went on. Um, I'll tell you, I'll tell you a few things. I really had to, how can I say it? I really had to experiment with what I could consume. So since my stomach was so ulcerated and I was bleeding constantly, part of it is like you're absorbing your own blood inside yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that struggle. You're sick because you're bleeding internally. And then whatever foods you're eating, your body kind of sees as disease. So it attacks the food you're eating and you're immediately flushing it out. So I had to experiment with food, and I experimented a lot with grinding foods up, food processor, blender. We didn't have juicers at the time, so
Right.
uh, a lot of it was blenders, food processing, somehow trying to mash it all into a mush. And um, it really wasn't working for me. I was still struggling with that. And I mean, just understand all this stuff happens over time. Um, then, then I would kind of gorge myself. I would just be like, you know what? Doesn't matter. I'd go down the street to whatever fast food place and I'd just buy whatever I could get, eat it all, then I'd be super sick for the next 2 weeks. Um, but I'll tell you one thing that really saved me, and a lot of people don't know this, so this will make it interesting. One of the things that really saved me was baby food.
Okay, yeah.
That's that's what I was reduced to. Um, One of the first things that I ever ate that gave me some relief from Crohn's disease was they make like a cream of wheat for
Hmm.
babies.
Yeah,
So it's rice, but it's ground up and it comes in
yeah,
a kind of almost like a powder. That was
yeah,
the
yep.
first
I know
thing that
exactly what you're talking about.
right. So that was the first thing that I ate, and I thought, man, I got a little energy out of that, So I went right back to the baby food section, and I got the carrots, the asparagus, the broccoli, the
I'm not
orange.
gonna lie. I would eat a tub of the Hawaiian Delight, Gerber's Hawaiian Delight. Man, try that out. It's a good one.
I mean, if there's a sponsor plug right now, this is it, man. I
There we go.
mean, baby food was my go-to. And I was very fortunate. I had a grocery store that at that time I had a grocery store that was like 3 blocks from my house,
Hmm.
and I had to kind of time it because I had real bad bowel issues. So if I went to the bathroom, I knew I had about 10 or 15 minutes before I had another issue. And so I would go to the bathroom and I'd run to the grocery store and get the baby food and I'd come home, eat the baby food, and then I'd go to the bathroom again. And that was the cycle. And that was the first time that I ever felt any level of relief from what I was eating. Then I started on the Pedialytes, the Gatorades, you
Hmm.
know, I had to stay away from juices. I feel like juice might be acidic. So
Sure.
I had to stay away from a lot of the juices. They didn't work for me. But I would mix in water with the Pedialyte and I'd Gatorade, Pedialyte water, and then the baby food. And I lived off baby food for a long, long time. That was
So,
that was the turning point for me. One of them.
so just through trial and error and seeing what works, you managed to do what the medical industry couldn't do for you.
Slightly,
Okay.
I was making it, but barely. I had a couple real serious issues. I had gone to the hospital multiple times. One of the times I remember for sure, I was only like I got down to about 177 pounds. I was really small. Um, I was really skinny. I was really weak. We went to the hospital, and again, I'm gonna accredit somebody. I had a girlfriend at the time. Her name begins with S. I won't say her name,
Shout out to
but
S.
yeah, shout out to S for sure. Um, I remember going to the hospital and I was hurting bad. But here's the problem I had. I was ripped. I was completely ripped.
Yeah.
And so I was 177 pounds, but I was just all muscle. And so the doctor came in, he looked at me and he goes, oh, I'll be back in a while or whatever. We're going to give him some IV fluids and blah, blah, blah. So my girlfriend at the time, she went out into the hallway and she flagged this doctor down and said, no, this is not right. Something is really wrong here. We need it addressed now. And the doctor came in, he looked me over, he gave me a really thorough exam, and he said, this guy is going to go into renal failure. He's going to die. He's going to die for sure. Um, so they basically gave me a bunch of stuff through my IV.
Hmm.
I really don't know what they gave me, but they gave me a lot of fluids and things through IV. And then they shipped me off to Iowa City. And that was the first time that I got the medical treatment that I needed, was at the Iowa City hospitals. So I really have to accredit S for her bravery and standing up and saying something, talking for me. And really, to be honest, if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't be here today.
Wow. How how good did it feel coming out of that and being able to go back into fighting when I'm sure, like you said earlier, you didn't think it would ever happen again?
Um, this would probably be a big change in my life. So I didn't really believe it. I still don't. Um, Again, to be honest and to be straightforward, sometimes I believe I died. I I don't believe that I made it through. It's kind of a hard it's kind of a hard way to look at life. Like, I faced death so many times. Sometimes I wonder if I made it or not. Maybe I'm just here in limbo. I don't know. Yeah.
Nah, man, you made it. That's why you're here right now, sharing your story with me. Um,
Yeah.
this is as I have said every single time we've talked in the last week or two. This is something that's hard for me to talk about, and it's because I respect you so much as a person. Um,
Fire
but
away.
I think it's something that the people that are going to watch this can relate to. Um, in 2007, can you share with us what happened in your family?
You mean my mother's situation?
Yes, yes, sir.
It's pretty simple. Um, my mother was murdered. Um, she was again struggling with drug addiction.
Mm,
She was doing again all the hardcore drugs. She was interacting with multiple men a day, meaning she was highly involved in prostitution. She was highly involved in drug use. She was somewhat housing other drug addicts. So kind of like what comes around goes around, right? Like they're all addicts. They're all involved in prostitution. They're all involved in something bad going on at, robbing, stealing, criminal stuff. Everything you could imagine she was involved in. And uh, she was murdered. She was murdered in the middle of the night, and she was dumped in an alleyway. I believe
mm.
downtown Davenport, and that's the realness of what happened in that situation.
Um, you shared with me yesterday the experience of going to the funeral and the feelings you had, and how afterwards it changed your life.
Yeah. And to recap that, it was really odd when I went to the funeral. I went first. We go to the wake, right? We find out she's gone. Then that was that night. Then we go to the wake, and then we have the burial.
Hmm.
And my whole thought process going through it all was just stand tall for your family. My sisters were there. My brother was there. Actually, my brother had been put in an academy. He didn't even know my mom was gone until he went to the wake. It was probably one of the worst things you could ever do to a kid. Um, so I was there basically putting my, which I always do anyway, just so you know, like I'm horrible at treating myself good. So what I do is I take care of my sisters and my brother before me, or I take care of my mom before me, or I take care of my friends before
Hmm.
me, take care of my
Yeah.
girlfriend before me. So my thought was stand tall, be there, be strong, and be there for my brother, my sisters, and my family, people who need me. And that's what I did. So we go through the wake, then we go through the burial, and I'd come back to the funeral home to drop some people off to their cars, and I left the funeral home, and I just had this overwhelming feeling. It wasn't happiness, but it was relief.
Hmm.
It was again, like it was weird for me to even feel that. It was like I'm relieved that my mom is gone. It didn't make any sense.
Right.
So I went home and I really sat down. I just turned my phone off and I sat there and thought about it. I'm like, why am I feeling this way? It's almost a feeling of happiness, really. And I couldn't bring myself to understand why I was feeling this way. So it took me about 2 or 3 days, and I think it was like the morning of the third day. I woke up and I realized what it was. And the feeling was, we're no longer going to have to worry about my mom in the street. We're not going to have to worry about who my mom is doing what with, where they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to have to worry about her getting locked up anymore. We're not going to have to worry about her drug abuse anymore. And I honestly believe that my mother's in a better place. And that was very difficult. It was a big hurdle to jump over, to understand my relief, and
Yeah.
understanding her passing or her murder brought her to a better place.
Well, from everyone in here at the other side, rest in peace, Agnes.
Right.
Um, what since you've retired from fighting, tell us what you do to fill your time now. I know you love to exercise. You do a lot of mountain biking. What else do you do um, these days to take the place of fighting?
Well, initially, I should use getting cut from the UFC. I really didn't have any plans to keep fighting, um, but I did fight after the UFC. I think I had like maybe 3 matches or something like that.
Right. It was
Um,
3. Yeah.
and what everybody can relate to, I think anybody who's ever been involved in fighting or MMA or any extreme type sports, you're just looking for the thrill again.
Yeah.
So I did do a couple additional fights that I believe I won all my last three.
Mm-hmm.
So I won maybe my last 3 matches. It was great to train again with the guys and um, just get in there, mix it up, and get in the cage again, and you
Sure.
know feel the
Feel the
rush.
rush.
Yeah,
Yeah.
feel the rush. You feel the crowd. The crowd screaming your name or whatever, and I just kind of moved on from it. I didn't really. I always knew you had to get off the ride at some point. So
Sure.
I just didn't want to turn into a guy who is chasing money and getting his brains beat out and struggling with CTE or drug abuse because you're in so
Right.
much pain so I just decided, it's better not to continue the sport because technically, man, I've had um, my arm broken. I've had so many stitches. I can't tell you how many. I had a lot of feet and ankle injuries because, from the kicking and returning kicks. And so when I got cut from the UFC, that's when I kind of picked up on my so-called passions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Going through childhood, I was never really involved in a lot of hunting or fishing and things like that. So I really got into the outdoors. I really enjoyed shooting. I enjoy hunting. I enjoy fishing. I enjoy biking. I enjoy trail hiking and running. And so I'm an outdoors guy for the most part. And ever since I got cut from the UFC, that's pretty much what I got myself into, was a lot of hunting and fishing and trail running and riding. And now I got to sit right here, but I ride fat tire bikes. I love those. Um, that's me, man. On the river or
How
in the woods. On the
how does
river or in the
catching a
woods. One of the
huge
two.
largemouth compare to landing a knockout punch? What's the biggest largemouth you've caught?
Well, I got to say the biggest largemouth I ever caught, I think it was 6'6". It was like 6 pounds, 6 ounces, or 6 pounds, 7 ounces. That was in
Okay.
Texas. Um, what's interesting about the bass fishing is the comparison. I never thought that I could compare fighting to fishing, which I really don't.
Okay.
But in a tournament style competition, it is comparable.
Sure.
Um, and I remember one of my first tournaments. I fished with my cousin, and we did really well in that tournament. I think we finished. It was like we finished like seventh out of, I think it was like 56 boats or something. So there's team tournaments, and it was like 56 boats, and we finished seventh. I mean, we did pretty well that day.
Wow.
I mean, we were within. I think we were within like a pound and a half of getting the actual paycheck. Like third place was only like a pound and a half difference. So What I mean by that is, they play that national anthem, before the tournament. Everybody's
Mm-hmm.
ready to go. You blast off. You're running down the river as fast as you can, and all these boats are crisscrossing each other, and
Oh,
people are
I've
cutting
seen it.
each
It's
other off.
crazy.
Oh, these guys! I'll tell you, they're nuts. They're nuts. So it's the rush. It really is a rush, especially
Hmm.
tournament style fishing. I think it's a big gamble as far as looking at that as a living. If you
Sure.
want, if you want to look at bass fishing and tournament style bass fishing as making a living, and as you can see behind me, um,
Yep.
you're going to have to get invested,
Hmm.
and it's a quick way to go broke. It's if you want
Oh
to go
yeah.
broke real fast, you're going to need a nice truck, you're going to need a nice boat, you're going to need some nice rods and reels, and you're going to have to really get after it. You're going to have to learn
Yeah.
something.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure it's a lot like fighting in a way. You have to train for it. You have to practice. You have to strategize. You have to see what other people are good at and what they're not good at.
right. And then when it's game time, it's game time. Like you got to,
Yeah.
I mean, you really got to be
Are
strapped
you ready?
in.
Are you ready?
Right. And I tell you, I never thought I would get a rush from fishing. And that is my rush is
Get
that
the.
sun. Yeah, the sun's coming
Yep.
up and they're like, number one, go. And he takes off, number two, go. And then like, when they get to your boat, you're blasting down the river, you're doing 65, 70 miles an hour, and you're skipping
That's
across the water.
crazy.
Yeah, it's a blast, man. It really is. It's a lot of fun.
Wow. Um, if you don't mind sharing, tell us about discovering your faith or maybe your search for faith or answers to life's questions.
Answers to life's questions. First off, is experience. And the answer to life's questions, it's living life and experiencing as much as possible, right? Um, so taking it all in, right? And some people will say it's the little things. Have you ever heard that?
Hmm.
Yeah. So some people will say it's the little things. And at this point in my life, I can really appreciate the little things. Um, and it is important. It's just sometimes it's just how close you are to somebody, or
Hmm.
um, I always talk about the vibe. Um, so I always tell people about the heart and how the heart is a pulse. It has an electric pulse to it.
Yeah.
So when you get within about 3 to 4 meters of somebody else, you can feel somebody else's electric pulse. That is the vibe that you're getting from them, is their heartbeat, their pulse,
Hmm.
their electric pulse. So I think a lot of the answers to life's questions are experiencing life, going out there and risking it. Life, there's a lot of risk involved. Um, Trying things you've never done before, which I do every year. I'd say since I got cut from the UFC, I would say every year I learn a new skill. I dial into something new and I learn it. Um, and I've been doing that now for, what is that, 12 years roughly. 12, 13 years. Every year I have a new goal and I do something new. So this kind of leads into the faith. Um, I met this great guy named Alex. His name was Alex. I'll say Alex T. And he kind of introduced me to the law of attraction, which I
Hmm.
thought was great, which actually turns out to me, and this is my opinion, to me, it is Christianity without saying God. It is the energy is God. The affirmations, it's Bible. The things you think and speak, you will create in your life.
Right.
The imagery, your dreams, your imagination, you will create that in your life. And those are special to you. So like this is all in the Bible.
Right.
That's the law of attraction to me, is the Bible without saying the Bible, without saying God, without saying Jesus Christ. So that's what led me to Christianity. And I'll tell you one of my first actual real connections with the Bible was um, there is a character named Andrew who's a fisherman, and I was like, wait a minute, I was like, this is too coincidental, but I do believe that the Bible does that to you, where there's going to be a name or there's going to be an instance or a time that is very relatable to everyone in one way, shape,
Hmm.
or form. So I was drawn in pretty quick. And a lot of things great things have happened for me through prayer, through my faith. And 2017, I was baptized at Bettendorf Christian Church here. Um, I had a great guy named John there to witness for me, and um, it's been a great journey. Christianity has been a great journey for me.
um, Other than the fishing and mountain biking, what do you have going on in your life today?
I'd like to say I'm just an average, ordinary guy. I get up every day, I work out, do my run, I do my bike ride. I eat good food. I really try to, the kind of like the body is the temple kind of thing.
Sure,
I try to consume the best thing I can to um, keep me healthy and strong, and go to work. Right now, I'm working in the roofing sales, so uh, a lot of it is insurance related. But if somebody needs a bid on a roof or something, you go up there, you measure the roof, give them a
sure,
price for their roof. But most of it is insurance claims, where we're doing roof, siding, gutters, windows, doors, anything exterior of the house or commercial business. So
gotcha.
that's what I've been doing. That's today. Just kind of a normal dude.
Right on. What can your friends, fans, people on this channel, people on other channels that are going to watch this, what can they do to stay in touch with you and follow the massacre?
Yeah. Clearly, I'm on Facebook. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can find me pretty much if you Google my name. You can find me. I will say that one thing I've not done that I was kind of making maybe a, a new goal was I kind of wanted to develop my YouTube channel. So maybe if you got on my YouTube channel, you make a comment, or comment on a video, or you send me something that you want me to make a video about. Maybe I'll do that.
Sure.
I'm not on TikTok, and I've thought about getting on TikTok, but I'm kind of up in the air about it.
What One final question for you before I let you go for the night. I don't want to take up your whole evening. If you could leave the people watching this one message, what would it be?
Yeah, I would tell everybody always be yourself. Um, the reason I say that is because I've seen so many people, including myself, be ostracized in a way, you know,
Right.
put out uh, because of their uniqueness. And I think when in today's society, we have a way of um, taking people who are unique and making them weird or making them strange, or
Sure.
when really they are different. They are different people, but they were given a gift, and they're different for a special reason. And it may be that those people who are different, who are maybe a little strange, who have different ideas and thoughts, um, could change the world. So, I mean, look at the Wright brothers. They said we're going to fly. I mean,
What?
people were like, "What? You think you're going to fly that bike out of here? You're crazy, right?" Uh, when you look at, I really like the stories of like successful people. I really do. So this again falls in line with always be yourself. Um, the guy who started McDonald's was a absolute failure, failed most of his life, and
Hmm.
was able to create McDonald's, which, as we know, is worldwide today. Um, I really like Steve Jobs. I really like listening to Steve Jobs and some of the things he had to say about um, basically never giving up on your dreams, and finding your passions, because your passion is what's going to drive you. So it is your idea, it's your thought, it's the thing God gave
Yeah.
you, your vision, your dream, your imagination. It's specific to you. So just be yourself. And I really do believe the more you are yourself, the more everything else is going to shape around you. Um, I've had those moments in my life. I almost sometimes I'm kind of thankful that I didn't grow up with money, because I could never be like anyone else. You see what I'm saying? Like,
Hmm.
I think if I grew up with a lot of money, I'd buy the shoes that other kids could have, or I'd buy all the stuff that everybody else had, and I would never be able to focus on one thing. Um, so I think it is important to understand that we're all here for a reason, and we all have a special purpose. We all have a special meaning. We're all here for a reason. Everything around you is happening for a reason. And so be yourself, because that's the way we were created. That's what we were put here for. Out of, there's a speaker, he always talks about the sperm count, basically, like you were like 1 in 5 million, he's like he's like you beat 5 million other sperm to be here. So I do believe that's special, right? Like,
Yeah.
for that one sperm and that one egg to come together,
Yeah.
and now you're walking the earth. Like,
It's not an
you
accident.
it is not an accident. So you were a competitor before you even knew you were a competitor. So just be yourself, and again, I like all the success stories. You look at people like Henry Ford, and I like Andrew Carnegie, like all these very famous people. And you'll find out, if you ever study most the famous people, um, they're very to themselves. They're
Hmm.
Some of them are very, what do I want to say, not like, how can I say it? They're not like little trolls in the closet, but
Right.
they don't mind being alone. They don't
Sure.
mind being
The
all by
solitude.
themselves. Right. There you go. Solitary people. Um, they actually enjoy it. They enjoy
Hmm.
being by themselves. So this is what I mean by weird. Like, some people might look at that as weird, or some people like today. I'll tell you what, man. If they had, if I could have made money off video games when I was a younger guy, I'd be the biggest gamer around, right? Like, um, so what I'm saying is, again, being yourself. Every now and then, time will match with what you want to do, and then you take the opportunity. So maybe your specific imagination or idea or thought will be developed for a specific time,
Right.
when now you can make money doing that, or you can survive off of whatever skill you learned up to this point.
I think
So
it's oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so just be yourself, and hopefully your time comes and you're able to capitalize.
I was going to say I think it's really fitting way to wrap this up. The last thing I was going to share with people, you just said being true to yourself. Being yourself was the quote that I had found um, from you, encapsulates what you just said perfectly, and I want to share this with everyone because I'm going to keep this quote with me. I think it's an amazing quote, and I think it encapsulates who you are as a person. Um, and something that'll really help people. You were quoted once as saying, "I fight for the things that no one can ever take from you, the things that make you eternal." That is being true to yourself.
That's right. And what I mean by that is, it's kind of like a thought or an idea. An idea can be an infection,
Hmm.
and if you are just yourself, that thought, that idea, that action, that thing you did may forever carry on in
Hmm.
history, and
Yeah.
so yes, when you are yourself, you'd be very surprised. I mean, gosh, I'd like to just kind of look at some more famous people. They just they were born and bred for whatever made them famous, right? Like a famous singer, um, a famous football player, or again, fighters, certain fighters. And sometimes you might look at somebody and you would say, gosh, they don't deserve it. They don't deserve all that. But that was their gift. That
Yeah.
was their gift. And they were true to themselves, and they swung away when it was time to swing, and they hit the ball, hit the home run.
Take the opportunity when it comes.
That's right.
All right, Drew, I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, and for anyone who sees this. You have been an inspiration to me for a very long time. I think you probably know you've been an inspiration to a lot of people. Um, so I appreciate you taking the time to first be my friend, and secondly, take time out of your day to do this interview. I consider you a true friend at this point, and if there's ever anything I can do for you, I would encourage you to just reach out, holler at me. You got my number. Call me
Yep.
anytime. If you're bored, if you're down at Beaver Lake and you want somebody to go fishing with you, call me up. I'll be there, man.
All right. I really appreciate that.
All right, Drew. Once again, thank you, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, man. Have a good night.
You too, buddy.
All right.